I am your guest host and moderator for the night, John Pearson. Why am I qualified? I have no idea. Don't call me a filmmaker next time either, Holly. But I did write a book called Spike, Mike, Slaggers, and Dykes about the era that this film Chant is Missing comes from, so I'm sure we'll be touching on that later when Rick and I are talking after the show. I am so pleased to be able to actually play a part in one of these screenings. Mike Tully and I once did Rick was unavailable when Mike Lee film had been scheduled, and we did with the aftermath of that one, but it felt just wrong to be here without him. But this is just one of the greatest series I've ever seen anywhere at any time in the entire world, and what Rick has done with Jewels in the Wasteland. Or, as we now call it, the never-ending Jewels in the Wasteland. I don't know what phase this is, but this tonight is the penultimate film of the current phase. For regular English speakers, I think that means next to last. So I think there's one more this week with Secaucus 7 later. Now, how many of you, because this is such a great series, I know a lot of people have been very regular. So I have a question. I brought door prizes tonight. We're going to do them before the show because they're for previous films in the series. So my question is, how many of you were here last Monday night for Agnes Varda's Vagabond? Okay, so this is for you guys. One of you is going to win a book. Someone who was here at that screening last week, sitting down front, I didn't meet her, mentioned a book about French actresses. Is that you?
Yes, and I already read it then.
She's here again, so she can't win. It's by a guy named Mick LaSalle, who I had no idea this book existed. It's by a guy named Mick LaSalle, who us old-timers know as one of the film critics on the San Francisco Chronicle for many years. And the book is called The Beauty of the Real, and I ordered it immediately when I went home last Monday night and read it very quickly, which is why I can pass it on. Used copy, so not that big an investment. But I'm going to ask a question. It's a tough one because you guys I hold you in to very high standards. And I don't know how to do this. I could say I'll look for the first hand, but I actually think we're going to have to do this on the, like kind of more of a Jeopardy method. I think that dude's back on the air today, right? So what you need to do is just be the first, I think, to shout out the answer. And then we'll confirm that it was your voice. So the question to win this Beauty of the Real is, what is the one and only film? It's two parts, so don't shout it out yet. You got to shout out two parts to an answer. What is the one and only film that Sandrine Bonnaire, the star of Vagabond, and Isabelle Huppert, the great French actress of the last 50 years probably, what is the one film that they did together, and who was the director?
Le Cérémonie by Claude Chabrol.
That's excellent. Yeah. Moving on, I have an Albert Brooks. We sound old school, old media guys. I have a room that's just filled with stuff that's now out of date, technologically speaking, that I just love. But I'm getting older and I want to start downsizing, so I'm going to start giving more things away. So, Holly, invite me more and I'll bring more stuff over. Okay, so Albert Brooks. First of all, how many of you were here for Lost in America? All right, good. You're the ones who can answer this question. We're allowed to answer this question. Throw the stuff over here. But first I should mention what this is. He did, you heard he did, if you were here, you heard he did stand-up for a long time, made little films for a long time. He did a couple of comedy albums which are very, very conceptual. And this one's called Comedy -1. And it doesn't really work the same way in CD format as it did on vinyl, but the entire back cover was a mirror, basically, which you would look at yourself in as you, for the last piece on the album, which is the piece called Comedy -1, in which he is your straight man, and he is delivering all the setup lines, and then you have a script, which is contained inside. So you tell jokes and get the laughs, which are of course there. So this is a tough question though, and it's not about his comedy career, it's about the movie. One of his movies. It's the one before Lost in America, Modern Romance. How many of you who were here for Lost in America have seen Modern Romance? Now we got an elite group that can win this. He is an editor in that movie. He is supervising a Foley session in a sound studio in one sequence in that movie, and they're trying to put in a Foley effect, a sound effect, for running in a space station. He's trying to find something in the sound library that will work. What does he try using? Rick wins. I don't know if he's eligible though. Somebody else. I actually was going to give this to him, so this is actually fair. Okay, this is but can you or anybody else? What's the joke after they pull up what they believe to be Hulk running to lay in as a Foley?
You saved the picture.
That's later, but first what happens is they're looking for this. What they hear when they put up Hulk running is, and Albert Brooks says, that is not Hulk running, that's Hulk breathing. Mark it. Okay, so the two of us will be up here afterwards to talk about Chan is Missing and how it represents so many things from that phase of the history of American independent film. It's going to be a lot of fun to do that with Rick. We haven't had a public conversation on the subject for a while. We used to debate it privately all the time. So that'll be big fun. And I also want to give a shout out and thank you. They were on screen, but I'll say it out loud since Tim Tsai used to run this and it helped me as a teaching assistant at UT at one point. But the Austin Asian American Film Festival is the sponsor of tonight's show. I think when Wayne Wang made this film, he didn't really expect it to play beyond very many film festivals or small, minor, Asian audience screenings. So the fact that it went as far as it did was very surprising. And now I want to bring up on stage to say his words beforehand, your founder and artistic director, Richard.
I'm so excited about the CD. I won that fair and square. I can't believe all you guys who saw Lost in America haven't seen Modern Romance. What the hell are you doing the last week? Go watch that. You can just come on, and then go back for real life, and I don't know. And there's no greater incentive to come to every damn movie we do, because you never know. There'll be door prizes and all kinds of special things. And I still have comments from the week before's movie. I forgot last week as I left it. That clip I showed of him doing a stand-up bit, that was because he's clearly younger, but that was from the movie was what, 85? That bit was from 1972 in the Flip Wilson show. You gotta be a certain age to remember Flip Wilson. But I just wanted to emphasize that. That was so much, it was he's so young. He's so amazing. But anyway, okay, Chan is Missing. I have a great history with this movie. And even in relation to this series, when we first started booking films for this series way back when, and it just might be Bob Dylan's endless film series, the never-ending film series, I was telling Lars, hey, Chan is Missing. Chan is Missing. Is there a print of that around? Because often we're limited on what's available. And so for 4 years, I've been asking for Chan is Missing. And it's there's not a print. I said, how can that be? It's just fallen out of, there's no DCP and there's no print. How could a film that was so fundamental to American indie cinema of the 80s just be poof, gone? So I was really happy to hear when, this round, Lars is hey, there's a 35 print of Chan is Missing. I was all right, we're gonna do this. So here we are tonight, I'm so excited. And I saw it so many of these films. I saw it a couple times back then. This film came out in spring, summer '82. I remember seeing it in Houston at the Greenway Theater. That was one of my favorite hangouts. There were 3 screens there, always showing great stuff. And this film, I think it just falls into the category of just purely, just inspirational. To me, it was one of those films that makes you want to just pick up a camera and make a movie. Wayne Wang did this for 22 grand, shot it on weekends. Back then there were a lot more stories of how a film got made. There were a lot less films made. But he shot it on 16 millimeter, it's black and white. But I think beyond that, the technical thing, and it's getting distribution and that's all amazing, but I just think it was inspiring. I call it kind of a backyard movie, and I tell indie filmmakers all the time, I think this film does what indie films can do best, and that is, you'll see what Wayne Wang is doing in this movie. It's just a beautiful exploration of this subculture he wants to share with people. He wants to break down stereotypes. He wants to show what he knows. He brings so much humor. This film's very funny. It's very intelligent, and it breaks these stereotypes. You know, it's credited as the first Asian American film to get a broader audience outside of the community. So it was seen as a big breakthrough. But I think, like what I was saying, what indie film can do best is take an audience on a journey. You know, you're not maybe beholden to genres and commerciality. Through these characters, you can really, you know, I tell people, well, show them something they haven't seen before. You know, not in the special effects realm, but in the human realm. Show them a world, even if it's just what's unique about you and your friend's sense of humor. You know, that might be interesting enough. Or just, you know, again, a backyard movie. So I think that's a great aspiration, and that's what he does in this movie so well. And this movie, the title kind of suggests, and even the look of it, black and white, you feel like you're stepping into some kind of mystery, some film noir. And I guess it is a mystery, but not of the typical kind. You know, if I were to give any advice watching this movie, I would say, settle in. It's more of an atmospheric experience. You know, it's not ultimately the Maltese Falcon. You know, this film gives you more. It's about ambiguity, and I think you come away with probably still more questions. You know, and it's really it's this great search by these two San Francisco cab drivers. Joe is kind of he's a middle-aged guy, and his nephew Steve is this kind of. He's got a great rap. He's a good shit talker, as I remember. He's funny. And their goal is to have their own cab, you know, the old taxi medallion, whatever that is. I don't know if a taxi medallion equals a cab or just the right to have a cab. We should ask Michael Cohen, I think, was big in this. But yeah, so they want their own cab, and they've given this guy Chan $4,000, and he's disappeared with their money. So they're really just looking for him. But as they say in all great, you know, detective mysteries, you're really looking for yourself too within that. So and for Wayne Wang, it's just a great excuse to, that's the narrative structure, but he's really using the film, the structure of the film, to take us on this journey. You know, we get to see, you know, we're in Chinese food kitchens, we're in law offices, we're in, you know, offices, hotels, bars. We're meeting all these people. So it's just a great, I don't know, I keep coming back to exploration, because I think that's what he was doing. He was exploring his own feelings about Chinese American identity. And, you know, you learn a lot, you hang out with these, you know, fun people. And I'll just leave it at that. I really do look forward to talking to John after. I think, yeah, there's a lot to say about American indie cinema at this time, but I'm just glad to be able to see this film again after all this time. Again, it's a, you know, it was done on weekends with in black and white, but I remember it just being super inspirational, and you know, and I'm sure you'll find it very interesting. But yeah, we'll have a nice discussion after, and so enjoy the film. Thanks for being here.
Possibly one more giveaway before the night is out. The VHS copy. Hard to come.
Very colorful for a black and white movie. Okay, New Yorker films, gotta hand it to them. They did it. You know, this film, I remember the story. You know, he had finished the movie. He thought he would just play festivals, so he sends it to. Hey, you finished the movie. You're excited about it. Poured all this time and effort into it. You sent it to, I think he sent it to 2 festivals initially. San Francisco, his own town. They rejected it. And Chicago. But he played it it got picked up in New York at New Directors, New Films, and got great reviews in New York. And
that was a fluke also, the fact that he didn't even quite mean to submit it to New Directors, and it just sort of happened by happenstance, and they loved the film.
Got a great, probably Vincent Canby review or something.
This is a first point we should make about Then and Now.
Yeah.
It's 1982. It was shot in 81, but that was 82. New Directors, and then it opened later in the year. That was a time when certain critics had incredible power.
Exactly. It was like theater. You got a good Canby review, you're gold.
And he didn't just say, "Oh, this film's pretty good,"
Yeah.
or "Hey, this for a low budget grainy movie, this isn't too bad." I mean, he just went nuts for Chan is Missing, and we were all, I lived in New York then, and it was like, okay, we saw the film, it's a good film, but like, what did he see that made him go that far over the top for it? But it wasn't the only time.
He was having a good day.
You know, it was like, it happened. It happened a lot, and it happened with Stranger in the Paradise a couple of years later in an even bigger way. So he was a great critic who really did know his shit and really loved making a difference, and people really followed his advice. You just don't have that anymore.
You mean distributors and audience followed his advice? Yeah.
It was like
Filmmakers don't follow.
you were a made man
Yeah.
if Canby tapped you. An
Yeah.
amazing thing.
I remember getting a really mediocre review for him, so I've never liked him.
Well, let's go there, because again, by slacker time,
My one time.
in New Directors, New Films.
Yeah, same template. We're at New Directors, ready for that, and you dragged me to the ritual.
Well,
I was like, hey, whatever. You're like, no, here's how you do it. You go to the New York Times, they drop it off at like, what, midnight?
no, it's a little early, like 10,
11, next
early
day's
night
paper.
hour.
You get it, and you go, and then, yeah.
They roll it down into the lobby, the first
You hear
off
chunk,
the
chunk, chunk.
press, because the presses used to be there. The Times isn't in the same place at all anymore. They don't
Yeah, they're building
near
near Times Square.
And nobody
Times
reads
Square.
print paper anyway, but yeah,
Right.
they rolled it down to the lobby, this old white-haired guy, and you could buy that. They were hot still.
Yeah, still a
The
little
paper was
warm.
Yeah,
Yeah,
people
this is
who
so-
had an incentive to be there to like read something right away because it wasn't out in advance online. It wasn't
Yeah, like
any other way.
business and things, like the important stuff, you could get advantage if you had it first, and that was the absolute news of tomorrow at 10:30 at night. So, and you see these movies where our theater, it's most dramatized, I think,
Right.
because that review really does kill you or make you in New York. Your play closes or it runs, by that review. So there's a lot of pressure and there's a ritual there. I didn't know it was in film, but.
It was, and then Lee Daniel, your DP, he was shooting. You're not allowed to shoot in the Times lobby, but surreptitiously he had this little camera and was filming people
Yeah.
like waiting for the paper. Because I told him like, there's these 8 people who are here every night, God knows why, waiting for the paper. You should film them. We should see figure out who they are. It's our little mystery. But you did not get a good review.
We didn't.
But overcame it.
But we showed his ass. Yeah.
It
We won that
happens
one in the long
sometimes.
term. Yeah. Yeah, and it was some things good. I remember even seeing I'm sorry to be so, but it was, you were really, it starts off good, and then, however, and your face kind of went, that when the next line starts, however.
Yeah, there was a lot of howevers. It's too much of a good
I
thing.
think he talked about, all dessert, something like that. But
he still had that. He still had that clout.
Yeah.
But again,
well, bless him. Yeah, I was kind of kidding about not liking him. I have read so many reviews of that era. He was the first, the gold mine, and he did make all the films. I mean, I remember being with, it was Sony Classics. It was Orion Classics back then.
Right.
But they were like, we're stuck with the Romer film with the bad review. That yearly Eric Romer film was like, the one got the bad review. They didn't know what to do with it. Got a bad review. They were, God, do we even release it? It's like, it was that. Yeah, different times. There's not one critic. There's nothing now that's remotely like that. Are there any? I mean,
No.
there's so many reviews that come out so quick. There's everywhere. There's no one review makes or breaks a film anymore, as far as I can tell.
So if you hate the idea of a white male gatekeeper or tastemaker or something like that, you could say, well, times are better. But he served so many good films so well. So I give him.
Yeah, definitely.
At this point in time, you alluded to this last week. There were very, very, very few American independent features being made. Period. You'll see John Sayles 2 nights from now. And he famously said, if your film had sprockets, people paid attention to it.
I know. Talk about a different time. Yeah, just the fact that there was someone made a film independently and it's playing in a theater, you can go watch it. It was really special. It was such a different, and I think the ones that inspired me the most in that way, in order, were probably the one we're going to see Wednesday, Return to Secaucus 7, just because I saw that, like, I had just gotten into film. I was just into it that first summer I was living in Houston. Saw this film, Return to Secaucus 7. So that just, oh wow, you can just do that? Get a camera, make a movie, writers,
It was a little,
intelligent
and that came
script.
out a little earlier in their chronology, so
Yeah,
that makes sense.
that
It would've been
first,
their
this second, and then like a
It
year
took
or
like
two
years,
later.
years to actually come out. It was like released.
Yeah, they
were like
they
2 or 3
shoot
years.
it in 1979, 80. It comes out by
Yeah.
81 or 2. You know, so yeah. And then this film I put in that category for sure in the same way. And then a couple years later, Eagle Pinnell's Last Night at the Alamo. I saw. Yeah, exactly. I saw that. And I was like, oh wow, you know. And Eagle had gotten a grant, just like Wayne got a grant from the American Film Institute. If you notice the credit. You know.
Another thing about then and now. So
Yeah.
10,000 from AFI and 12,500 from the NEA.
There's your budget, 22,000.
That's what he shot with.
Yeah, grants are important.
It dried up at a certain point. You couldn't get individual grants from the NEA at a certain point. So, you know, that's one of the reasons you took an interest in finding a way to sort of recreate a world.
Just because I felt it personally, and you know, you see how it does affect the filmmakers' trajectories. And speaking of, if you want to help our grant program, how many? I assume, is everyone here a member of the Film Society? Please raise your hand. Okay, thank you, thank you. If you're not, you should be. Best deal in town. You know, we got a lot going on, and I think we've got almost 2,500 members. Lars and I said we're going to give a free popcorn to the 22,500 members. So we're closing in. It could be you, or you can get the chance missing. Are you going to ask a question for
Later.
oh, at the end. You know, I was thinking about Wayne Wang's, you know, other films, and if you wanted to just immediately see another film by him, and if this is your first, I would jump to, and I don't know your opinion, but I really like the one he did. I mean, I like a lot of his films, but he did one toward the end of this decade in Hong Kong, where he grew up, before it was, you know, the hand back over to China or whatever, called Life is Cheap, Toilet Paper is Expensive. It's really good. It's the same kind of exploration. I think there are more like crime elements. There's someone like a briefcase, you know, handcuffed to someone, and there's stuff like that going on. But it is a similar, you know, view of Hong Kong that he.
It's really interesting. It's a very experimental film.
Yeah,
after
it
he'd
is.
done Joy Luck Club, which was
Right.
the crazy rich Asians of his time.
Yeah.
You know, it was just interesting.
He jumped between mainstream
Right,
and
one
indie.
for them, one for me.
Yeah.
That kind of, yeah.
He was good at that. He ends up, I mean, after this he did Dim Sum. He seems to have a real nice touch too for domestic, you know, family kind of things. He does that very well. I liked.
Peter Wong also plays the Henry the Cook with the samurai.
Don't we love Henry?
It's
You
a
know.
great character. He made it. He's a director as well.
Yeah.
Made this very highly regarded film from then called The Great Wall, or The Great Wall is a Great Wall, which
Yeah.
is, I think they shortened the title, but that was such.
Yeah.
The Great Wall is a Great Wall.
Yeah. So I love, and I looked it up. The guy who plays Joe, Moy. Woodmoy, yeah. He just passed away this last fall,
right.
6 months before his 100th birthday. So Wood got a great run. I don't know.
He acted
Makes
a
me
little.
feel good.
So let's go through these
He's
other
very-
actors.
he was kind of a theater actor.
He did act. He was an actor of
he's
sorts.
an actor.
Most of the rest of the cast were not.
Not really
Which is
professional
again
actors.
very typical of the time. Just using
Yeah,
non-professionals.
get your friends, get your people you see every day, and talk them into
It's shot on weekends. As you
Right.
were saying earlier,
Yeah, everybody's got
16
their day
millimeter.
job, yeah.
You know, 10 weekends.
Yeah, that's how you did it.
You watch, you can tell there's a lot of voiceover, which is one way.
Yeah.
There's a lot of non-sync sound. These are ways
Mhm.
of sort of getting around more complicated. Well,
Yeah, he's kind of piecing it together, you know, the cutaway and the, you know, certainly has that one camera. And on the lower your budget, one of the hardest things to achieve is a good continuity. It's just sometimes kind of difficult. So, but he works around that. These nice 2 shots, and I just love the spirit of this, the way it's shot. And you know, he's having fun genre. I kind of really love that center. Well, it's more than halfway through the film. But when suddenly, it's lit and that gun is exposed and plays that music, it's like, that gun's going nowhere, Yeah, that gun is not going to play into this movie. The photo, the girl, and the thing, none of those ever add up to anything. So that's, from a film perspective, that's just pretty awesome, and you can kind of get away with it. He's saying something with that. I love it.
And this is in conjunction with I guess the thing that's most clear cut about the film, even though we didn't have the expression yet in 1982, is it's a great example, as were many other indies in the 80s, of identity politics. But I would call it, I think that's a modern day term, and we used to just say something so much simpler and to me so much more elegant, which was the first film of its kind where you could see yourself on screen. That's what so many of these films from that time sort of represented, whether it was
gay cinema,
Spike doing She's Gotta Have It, or
Sure.
these were just first time films for audiences that didn't have.
Well, isn't that the impulse to make art in the first place? I mean, you have something in your life you want to share, the rest of the world doesn't know or hasn't seen it in the way you see it, and you just feel like you have something to say, and you can feel that in this. Like I was saying in the intro, you're just, whatever your background, you're often prone to stereotypes. I felt it as a Texan, as a Southerner in my early stuff. It's like, no, that's not the Texas I know. If everybody's got, I'm gonna make a whole movie and there's not gonna be any cowboy hats or boots. That's a simple little thing, but it's a little bit of I'm gonna show another side to the world I know. These are my friends, my neighborhood, what I'm thinking. So that can be a good impulse, in wherever you're coming from. So,
But it's funny because even as, I don't know how you're going to respond to this, but even as a lot of
that never even got mentioned. My impulse, where his thing is the headline.
Yeah.
So, but still, I think the motivation is similar.
Well, I was going to say, once certain films that showed certain ethnic groups or whatever for the first time, you go through all that, and it sort of becomes, as you do more and more of them, it's great in general, but there's diminishing returns for standing out that way. But when you get the Slacker, it's interesting. It became such a signature for Gen X. I mean, in its own way, that's an identity politics film too.
Yeah, which I hadn't. That's unintended. I mean,
Because again, you were making it about who you knew and what you knew and your familiar world.
Yeah, but that's kind of a cultural assessment, categorization that happened after the film, which is this. He had to have known, making it, or when Spike's doing She's Gotta Have It.
Right.
The questions are going to be about that.
Well, because his background was, he was a community organizer, and I mean, a lot of that stuff that you see, that's very much from his life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he'd gone to college over near Berkeley, California College of the Arts, studied film. Yeah, so.
Eventually decided that would be the way he expressed himself.
Yeah.
It wasn't how he started.
Right. Had something to say, but you never know what. But yeah, I remember when talking to you, said Spike said something like that film. Oh gosh, it was the 5 Heartbeats. At that point, there had been a lot of African American films, and I think he said Spike Lee said something like, "Well, we've arrived if now that we can make mediocre films," or something like that. And it's like, so many films that there's going to be they don't all have to be great, or something like that. It's like, that's a good place to get to.
It's funny because that's Robert Townsend's second film.
Yeah.
It was a big step up.
Right.
Well, pretty big step up.
I like that film, by the way.
I'd
I'd watch that film. I liked it.
Yeah, it's a pretty good film.
Yeah.
But it's his Hollywood Shuffle, which was sort of like the one that came after She's Gotta Have It.
Right.
And still did really well because it got identified as the first credit card.
Yeah, the back then the headline of movies would be how you financed it, or like how cheap it was, or so that when he had actually put it on his credit cards, and that sounds pretty low budget. And I said, well, who has a $60,000 line of credit, or whatever? That's a pretty big credit line. I got $600 on my credit line, so I was always thinking, like, there's another story there.
I think
but it worked. It worked.
I think he shot the skits. I mean, half the film is skits. But I think he had shot the skits and pieced them together one by one, and then got the money to make.
Right.
the coherent movie that's
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah,
from
gotta
Roland,
jump
so
in there
it's
somewhere.
Yeah, but the story was always not just the film itself, but the circumstances.
Yeah, and what year did that go away? You know, like Robert with his, you know,
$7,000
mariachi, yeah, you know, another thing. And of course, what you're looking at on the screen in a theater didn't cost what I was always thrown that. It's like, well, what did Slacker cost? I said, well, I'd spent $23,000 by the time I had a finished thing I could send to you on video.
Right.
But I hadn't finished it on film. You blow it up to 35. You know, pretty soon your budget's hitting $100,000 pretty quick over. And if you do all that stuff, finishing. And,
That would have
but-
been similar here. What you went through is probably almost identical to what
Yeah,
his
but
budget wound up being to release. You had to have.
But there was a
35
race to the
release.
bottom, the
Yeah.
lower you could
Yeah.
get, you know. So you quote
That's right.
without lying, you say, it was a $23,000 budget.
That's right.
And that was the budget? It's like, well, there wasn't a budget, but that's what it cost. And, you know, so there was this race. It became a joke at Sundance. It's like, you know, I made this film it just got lower and lower. And pretty soon it was so prevalent that it just, poof, it seemed to go away overnight that anyone gave a shit how low budget your film. And I was glad for that, because it really shouldn't, should it? Who cares, you know? So now I think I did a film on my phone I think you could get it under $5. Yeah.
One of the reasons I wanted to bring a video box out is also to sort of describe what was happening sort of globally between the early 80s and the middle and later 80s, which marked the initial very strong rise of American independent feature film. There was still an amazing number of huge brand name, you know, world-class directors working all over creation, not getting drawn into Hollywood, just working where they were from.
So many still alive, still doing great.
Very active throughout the decade. So how is there room? And people were going to those films here in America. So how is there room for this new movement to like come up through the cracks? Well, video's the reason why. They quickly discovered that you know, foreign language films always used to have kind of a problem when it came to the aftermarkets.
Those damn subtitles.
Yeah, the subtitles were really a problem.
And they're really small on the screen.
Video is bad, and television worse.
Yeah.
You know, so if you're looking
Airplanes.
for something that is not just going to make all of its money theatrically, but that will then live on and produce more revenue for whoever's involved as investors or distributors or whatever, a film in English, you know, is much more valuable, and that's really what fueled.
And those are playing in the same specialty theaters, same distributors. They were just English language for the
And even
first time, really.
And even as some of the video performance, again, as we experienced on Slacker, was less than, or She's Gotta Have It, another example, or Stranger in Paradise, another example. Even if the video performance wasn't that great compared to what the theatrical impact had been, still, as time went by and cable television and everything else, those films had a place that foreign language films really didn't.
Right.
And so it's sort of like, the good news is it provided a golden opportunity.
But I noticed with that rise, though, I started lamenting, like, oh, how come, you know, the international director you admire, the film doesn't even have a distributor? You know, what's going on? And you realize, oh, we've kind of displaced, you know, American indie, English language indie was displacing the international cinema slowly but surely, and less of those were getting, and now it's to a trickle, you know, it went really, going that way.
But the thing that's interesting is with a film like Chana's Missing or She's Gotta Have It, you were seeing one of the appeals of foreign language film from another country is like you were seeing something different. So the identity politics part is like, oh, we're seeing ourselves on screen, but for other people who aren't part of that group, it's sort of like a view into a different world that you don't normally see. So you're seeing that in subcultures from home instead of seeing it from, you know, somewhere else around the rest of the world.
Yeah, like I was saying in the intro, I tell filmmakers, like, give people an anthropological journey, you know, if nothing else, show them something they haven't seen. You know, you can do that, and it works really well. Cinema's powerful, you know, it's magical that way. So, you know, these are a lot. You break it down. A lot of our understanding of the world is through cinema. You know, you think you know someplace and you only know it through, as I do, I'm a film guy, you know.
But when you see something like this near the end of this film, when you're coming to realize that you're not getting a solution to the mystery, when you see a long held shot on the water, do you think audiences, I mean, again, the reviewers really set this up well and sort of telling them why they should like it. But
Yeah.
do you think an audience on its own can watch something like that and still, you know, get totally into it, or does it take that kind of mediation to help them be ready
I
to
don't
appreciate
know.
it?
Yeah, I think it probably helps, don't you think? I like the way he sets that up, you know, Golden Gate Bridge is there, you know, at least you know what body of water you're looking at. It's not just some abstract, you know, water. Yeah, but I think people are used to that in kind of specialty cinema, international. Everybody read those reviews. Everybody, yeah, I think it does help. Well, it makes you open to it, I guess. Maybe a little less judgmental. I don't know. But this, like I said, this film had sort of disappeared, so I guess it wasn't. I don't know to what degree it was catching on with next generation. You know, like it had sort of. And I don't know what's behind it. Often it's rights issues or availability. But
Well, I mean, when New Yorker went, I mean, a lot of those deals were shorter term anyway. When New Yorker films went
when they go away,
kablooey, it was like, you know, a lot of that.
So do all the films. Yeah.
Criterion,
sad when you
Criterion
realize-
got a lot, but not
I
everything.
realize, oh yeah, it's just a business.
Yeah.
Fluctuates just like any other business coming and going. So, well, we're up here gabbing away. Please throw a hand up and ask a question, or not necessarily a question, an observation, or anything you want to add to our.
Back middle, go ahead.
Yeah, I think of Wayne from his New York movies, and you mentioned Hong Kong, and this was San Francisco. I was just kind of curious,
Smoke.
what was his path through all those different places? I mean, did he start in San Francisco
Yes.
and end up in New York, or?
Well, just because he did,
Smoke and
yeah,
what Blue
Blue in the Face. He did 2 films in the mid
They were
'90s.
just together, right?
Yeah, they were like companion movies. I remember.
Oh, and then there's
Smoke.
Made in Manhattan.
Yeah, and
with
then he
J-Lo.
did. Yeah, he did Made in Manhattan. And
I'm not making fun. I'm wearing my favorite shirt from Fiji tonight. We showed that movie in Fiji.
Went over.
Went over big.
Big.
They loved it.
Yeah, I like the Natalie Portman, Susan Sarandon. Was it called Anywhere But Here or Nowhere But Anywhere But Here? Yeah, I remember liking that quite a bit. Like I said, he does families and
Yeah.
that really well.
He was very, very Bay Area though, not.
Yeah, he still
not
is.
a New York figure.
Yeah, I saw him a few years ago at San Francisco, some event. I didn't talk to him, but I heard he was there, and I looked over and said, I don't know, it's felt awkward going up and saying, oh, hey, well, how come I can't see Chan's missing? I didn't do that. Actually, I did that, and that's why he struck a print. That's why we're here. Nah, I just like, gonna shy that way. What else? Yeah, you have it. Yeah.
Talking about working with non-actors, what are some of the things you will, like found out in your career that you will, like some advice that you have for getting good performances out of working with the non-actors?
You're talking that advice on working with non-actors? Oh, wow. Yeah, I mean, can you really look at this movie and say who's an actor and who isn't? You know, you shouldn't be able to, actually. You know, the young woman who's telling them about the linguistic difference, and that pretty early in the movie, how funny. I mean, why would you not think she's a pretty polished actor? Look what command she has of the language. Looks like she knows her lines. She's very comfortable. You know, but she's just probably someone he knows who, you know, if you can create an atmosphere where they're comfortable. And you know who does, he gets zero credit for it as far as I hear. It's never mentioned. But you know who's the best at bringing in non-actors to be great in his movies is Martin Scorsese. Just all those guys in Goodfellas, you know, I was in a conversation once with someone kind of close to that movie. He says, you know, they're like real kind of mobster type guys, a lot of those guys. One's De Niro's their landlord, one's Michael Jackson's old manager that he already met at something. You know, he's just like, hey, I got a part. You know, that's, you know, if you know an energy or a certain type, and they can do something, then they could be great. They might not have a range, but sometimes you're not looking for a range. You're looking for a distinct character who does, you're asking them to do something within who they are. And I think you can proceed with confidence if you can create an atmosphere where they're comfortable. And so I think, you can tell, hey, we're just hanging out here and, make them comfortable. I think you can get a good performance. But I think it's also pressure packed. I've been in movies where I was like, oh gosh, I've done that before and said, oh, I kind of should have got an actor here. I'm asking a little more of them. And they tensed up a little bit. They're not quite as good as they were, so it's like, okay, I'm gonna have to work harder. So there's nothing as good as a great trained actor. That's, come on. But for certain things, certain movies, I don't know, you can't really be precious about it. It can work at all levels. That's why I brought up, Scorsese's level. That's the highest level, and he's putting these guys who don't have social security numbers in scenes with De Niro, and these guys, they have to pay in cash, just because he knows they're perfect.
But those are smaller roles. What about? And you never used
pretty
somebody.
big.
No, but I mean, it's not like the Dardennes, using.
The lead in
Yeah.
the movie and all that. Yeah, that's its own. And that can work too. It's just, again, what you're asking of somebody. So, I mean, in this case, Steve and Joe, I mean, if we can break it down, Joe is an actor, and then Steve, I guess he's not.
I
I mean,
not. Yeah.
I don't think he had a big career, but he's great, I think Steve, isn't he hilarious? I mean, I think he's kind of perfect,
It's funny. I watched earlier today and I watched now. So Steve gets funnier. Twice in a day, he's even funnier.
Yeah. I remember him talking shit, but it took a while. I was like, oh yeah, okay, yeah, he's funny. I thought I maybe overstated it earlier, but I think he's pretty great.
Who else?
He's fun.
I was going to ask if your first time experiencing the film, or this first time experiencing the film, any sequence moved you, emotionally moved you? I thought Steve and Joe arguing over the searchers kind of movie, emotionally moving.
Which scene?
When they're arguing if they should still continue to search.
Oh, when they're walking.
Yeah, I thought that was really
Beautiful.
good.
Yeah, that was-
Either of you, if there's one sequence that
Yeah, the movie really kind of comes to a head there. So that was your favorite scene, or the one that kind of grabbed you the most? I don't know. Yeah, that scene's great. That one. I think the very end. I was just wondering about. He's playing that song and just keeping on people on the sidewalk. People just kind of looking at the camera a little bit.
Yeah, that old lady on the balcony. It's like
kind of rocking back and forth.
Yeah, almost to the
music, pretty kind of on beat a little bit. Yeah, I thought that was an interesting. I just had forgotten that closing sequence altogether. Part of me thinks there's you have to get this movie to 80 minutes, or we can't. So he just added 3 minutes. But then no, it's just all the shots you haven't used in the movie. Just put them in and we'll do something. But no, I don't. It's really much more than that.
It's moving.
And I was very moved by it. It's just like life is happening everywhere.
Sure. Another thing about the then and now of it, though, is it's shorter when you're shooting film and paying to process film.
And you got $20,000. Yeah.
Movies were shorter.
Yeah. You did less takes. Everything was a big deal. Yeah. So it was pretty precious, like that. The film stock is not cheap. The processing, and you got to print a work print. It's like, yeah.
But with these performers, you don't get the feeling that if they'd done multiple takes that it would have changed all that much, right?
I don't know how many takes they did or didn't do. Did you read?
Well, I saw an interview where he said he wanted to take a note from Romer, who said, "Hey, if it's not working on the first take, move on."
Just throw it out. It's not meant to be. Wow. I think that's Clint Eastwood's way, but he doesn't throw it out. He just uses it. I mean that in the best way. Clint's always good in those movies. If there's an extra looking at the camera, no problem.
I think
Because they should be looking at him.
Perfect World should be next year's inductee into the Texas Film Hall of Fame. Come on. Who else? Yeah.
Do any of the physical releases of this film offer subtitles for the cook or the
No.
command?
No.
No, isn't that an interesting choice? Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because that's a big choice to not subtitle in the extensive sequences, and I like that choice.
I think it kind of emphasizes the disconnect between him and
Yeah,
the more culturally Chinese.
yeah, you just have to. I've had to make that choice before too. Like, okay, what's realistic and what, if someone's speaking another language, and it's like, no, because you want it to feel like how it feels when you don't understand a language. You pick up on body, language, or you try to communicate. It's funny at the end, he goes on that extended sequence, we find out retrospectively, he's telling him, you're not Chinese enough to understand, wasn't that kind of, but he breaks into song. That's just kind of funny, because you don't really see it coming. So, I don't know. Yeah, I think that's a big choice. But on one hand, a little frustrating, but if you're that frustrated, learn the language.
Can you draw a distinction between Chan is Missing and Stranger Than Paradise in this respect? Stranger Than Paradise seemed to be a film that was a catalyst for so many more filmmakers than Chan. And what's the difference, or what feels?
I think that's by sheer demographics. There's just more, hipster, white people who are aspiring to be filmmakers, just by sheer numbers. So that was kind of closer to home, maybe.
Okay.
But I hope, like I said, this was very inspiring to me, and I'm sure, a whole generation too. Asian American filmmakers. I don't know. Did Justin ever talk about this one?
Not so much, but again, it's been kind of an unavailable film, so it's
Yeah.
he could have almost missed it.
Yeah.
I'll ask.
Yeah. Just curious.
Who else? What else? Yeah.
So this is actually a follow-up question and comment on your question about subtitles. I was having the same thought. I was curious why you made the choice because the dialogue, the Chinese or Cantonese dialogue, it was intentional. It was good. They were not just rambling, and it said a lot about the characters, both Henry and the last man Joe talked to. So it's funny that I don't know. It's just interesting because I think he did have intention when the last guy when he was singing, he was actually explaining different cultures from northern China and southern China, and he's singing different styles of singing from both regions. And so I was just wondering, what he was thinking when he made this choice, because maybe he is creating that distance from the audience, creating emphasizing on the cultural burden, but at the same time, I think he wants the Chinese audience to really understand the characters and understand the cultural historical background of that period of time and of that community. So I don't know. I was just very interested.
Well, so you got an extra added bonus since you understand the language, and we were fine not understanding the language. That's a win-win
For us, it's.
Henry's character was so full with his Chinese comments, though.
Right.
So I thought it was very interesting.
It's funny, like he translates after and not anything directly. He just says the gist of the conversation. But yeah, if you're watching it, it's Don Rickles in Chinese. It was funny. I didn't think this film was very funny.
Way back.
I saw, my first time seeing it, and I'd seen, I loved, Smoke and Blue in Space were just, such powerful films, and you're just like, you knew there was a master filmmaker behind that, because that's a lot of egos and incredible talent to be able to wrangle. And then to see this first film and go, oh, I can see where he was working with that kind of a thing. And then he's always got these characters where one is super passionate about one thing, and another character that doesn't really care anything about what he's saying, but they're best friends and they can't stop hanging out together. They love it so much. And I see so much of that in your work. I just want to ask, was this a film that you had seen earlier on that influenced you, or
This?
was it just, yeah?
Yeah, very much. Yeah, I talked about that before. I was like, yeah, sure. you know, so like top influence. But I don't know about those exact dynamics. It's funny or whatever, but that's kind of hard to break down. But sure, you know, I think you're influenced by everything. You know, anything that leaves an impression on you. Or, you know, so. Yes.
I have a question about like you talk about highlighting like jewels in the wasteland, certain films from the 80s, and you're growing up watching these films and they kind of inspired you. I was just curious, what films kind of inspired you to shoot your first 8mm film, Plow, and how did that?
Well, inspiration in these films. Yeah, this whole series. Well, you know, these weren't films. I was seeing these when I was in my early 20s, so they're not really films I grew up with. You know, that would be probably a whole different list. These were films of like someone who wanted to be a filmmaker. You know, someone who was really kind of becoming a cineast and really all in on film. These are the films that, well, they're the ones I want to see again after all these years, for sure, but films that must have left some kind of mark if you're still thinking about it 35 plus years later. So, but, I mean, this is just scratching the surface too. We're up to like, I think we've filmed 30 whatever films in this series, more probably by now, 40 something.
How many chapters has this been? Because Holly
don't know.
couldn't quite remember.
And the right title it's the Dylan's the Never Ending Tour,
Yeah.
right? So this is the Never Ending. I was thinking, oh, I got that.
Yeah.
Never Ending film series. Well, the 80s were a good. It was a good decade. You know, I've got it up here and ragged on the mainstream 80s, just because it was a pretty, you know, vapid time, I think, in the culture. It was kind of sucky, but it was a good time to be underground, and it was a good time to really love cinema because there was so much. And the mainstream, bad as a lot of it was aspiring to be, there's so much good did get made. And like John was saying, still top people. You know, you got Bergman and Fellini and, you know, these great Tarkovsky and Bresson, you know, these great international directors who are no longer.
Kurosawa, I mean.
Yeah, they're making their great late work. You know, you got Truffaut and Godard, you know, just they're all still alive making films. Varda, you know. You've got so many people just still doing it. And then these little waves, new waves, and, you know, other countries, so much international. And then, yeah, the American indie scene comes alive. And, you know, there's another subgroup, and we show these here and there. You have to kind of look for them. But underneath the American indie scene, there's this other world of, I would say, more avant-garde features. You know, I think the artists are like James Benning, John Jost, people like that. Yvonne Rainer, Mark Rappaport. I'm just going through.
You're doing good. You're doing
names.
better than
Yeah,
I am.
like, and these are often very like structuralist films, 10-minute takes, very, and those influence everybody too. There's no way that doesn't influence Stranger Than Paradise and early Jarmusch, because those are in the air artistically. You know, I don't know. They're not really playing at festivals, but they're playing at, you know, you just see them somewhere, museums or some little thing. But so there are all these film artists, and those films are often made by, you know, one person alone. But, you know, there's a big avant-garde tradition too that's still going well in the 80s. And we've shown a lot of those over the years, and I love them. So, but often it's one person making a film alone. So to answer your question, those inspire you even more. This is inspiring, but it's still a crew of 7 people or whatever. So you got to work up to that. You know, what you start with is something even more intimate. So, you know, if you're going to make a film alone, there's some good precedent there.
I was curious because on Plow you start in the film and you direct it, and before you did Slacker, you talk about, I was watching your commentary on Slacker, how you went from Plow to Slacker, and I'm just curious what film like you saw and you just thought, I can do it, I can act in my own film and do it, you know?
You were acting pretty recently.
First he said star, and that's
Yeah,
good too.
star. And for the record, this series, you know, I so love talking about other people's movies. That's why I'm doing this. You know? This wasn't. I didn't just show my first super feature.
Was it Poetry in
but-
Motion by Ron Mann?
Oh, I do. You know, that's the night I met Ron Mann. He didn't remember years later, but he showed that at the Museum of Fine Arts in Houston in '83, Poetry in Motion, and I went up and said hi to him after. But that was that's a documentary, but a very good one. As is Ron's movie that is playing here, Carmine Street Guitars.
Very good film.
One of our great documentarians.
Got one?
You had mentioned some of the avant-garde filmmakers from the 80s, and you mentioned James Benning. Just a, I don't know, this isn't a question, but maybe just a recommendation. I think Benning's Landscape Suicide is from the late 80s. I was just gonna say, if you're gonna continue to do this series, I'd
88.
love to see that up on the big screen.
Yeah, you know,
If he's gonna continue to do this.
yeah, that's my goal now. I'm gonna just grind. The films are gonna get more and more just structural and challenging until there's just no one left. It'll be 3 people watching, me, you, and a couple others will drift in. We'll just grind it out. 10 minutes. No, I'm kidding about Jen. I love Landscape Suicide's a total masterpiece.
Yeah.
And he was our first visiting filmmaker back in '88. That's where we bonded, became very good friends. We had a little grant money, thank you, from the Texas Commission on the Arts. I said, hey, we're gonna bring in filmmakers, we're gonna do all that, and he was the first guy invited. So, but it would be good. A lot of that, because those are in 16 millimeter, they're just kind of hard to show now. 16, all the theaters back then had 35 and 16, because there were some films that were just distributed in 16. If you're gonna watch a Ross Malco, a lot of those documentaries, they didn't blow them up to 35. You were watching a 16 print in the theater. Thing of the past, long time.
Yeah, there was enough of a circuit to make that
long
work.
time gone. Long time gone.
Well, I was just gonna say I saw it on YouTube, so.
And James is such a film artist, you know, that's like, oh, that's unfortunate. But at least you saw it. That's it. He's great. He jumped to digital. I don't know, we're talking. Let's talk after about James. He's great. He's one of my favorites.
Somebody want to win a VHS copy of Channel's Missing?
All right, you can have it. You had your hand up. Oh, no, you got to answer a
It's like
question.
it's between the two of you. So here's the question. Who was Wayne Wang named for?
Oh,
Go ahead.
John Wayne.
That is correct.
Yeah.
You want it for him?
I want it for him.
Yeah, apparently his dad was a big film buff, and he watched at least the film a week and was a big John Wayne fan. So.
Is that can you
What
tell
else
what
could
movie
be?
that is on the TV in the apartment at that
No, I
point?
was looking at that. Did anybody recognize it?
It's really hard. It looks like a Western now.
Yeah, he's kind of young. I was
I
thinking
kept
like,
wanting to see John Wayne, but I couldn't. I
No.
just couldn't make it happen.
yeah, I didn't know that one for sure. Usually you put something kind of more iconic that everyone knows, or at least film people, but that one I was like, maybe it was just on TV that day. Maybe he didn't get the rights. Maybe it was on the $1 Million Movie at 3:30. I don't know. Yeah. So, well, any more burning comments or questions that you have?
Yeah, I just had a question. You're often being described as one of the founding fathers of like the hangout film, whether it's like a genre or like a type of narrative. But this also seems to be really much in that kind of vein, just like movies that drive because they have such lovable characters. Like it's almost a shame that it's so short because you just want to hang out with everybody for a long time. And I was wondering, like, what would be like one of your favorite hangout films that even predates this one?
Right. I mean, that is an interesting genre, you know, the cinema of hangout movies.
Well, it's also sort of a way of saying don't expect a whole lot of story, right?
Yeah. Character-based, for sure. Guys, is Cassavetes' Husbands a hangout movie?
That's a great movie.
But does it qualify as a hangout? They're sort of traveling, but it's 3 guys hanging out. Hanging out and drinking, you know, add that. But, yeah.
The Searchers is also guys hanging out to the end.
The Searchers.
Yeah.
Not a John
Let's
Wayne
define
movie.
hanging out. Hanging out.
silly now.
Yeah. Gosh, I don't know. But yeah, someone should write. Is that book been written? The cinema
It's all yours.
hanging out. I'm a proud, member of this secret society, but I'm not. I don't know.
It's
They
gotta
don't
be-
claim to be an originator by any stretch.
That slow cinema book came out a year ago, so maybe Hanging Out is next.
Slow.
Remember that one?
Right. Slow cinema. That's not exactly a sales pitch, is it? Slow cinema.
You immediately were protesting, like, no, those Romer films aren't slow. What are they talking
They're
about?
not. What does that mean, slow? Like, you have to have a pretty quick brain, actually, to process. So, I don't know, slow cinema.
Anybody else?
Silly. Let me pitch once more. Wednesday night's film. We'll jump coast and go to the East Coast for Return of the Secaucus 7. Very contemporary to this, year before, but Sayles is kind of he's a little bit of an industry insider by the time he's making his first film. He's written a number of scripts and he's a novelist and comes at it from a writing perspective, but he writes a movie and is compelled to direct it that I think he's saying a lot about his generation. The same ones we were sort of sending up last week and Lost in America. It's the same generation, kind of coming to grips with being in their 30s and those years being behind them. And like I said, Kasdan did it a few years later with Big Chill, famously. So the joke was to call Secaucus 7 the Little Chill. Before it was like the indie chill. But people of that time felt. I had some older friends who said, "God, watching that is like watching home movies. It was so real to them." So I think it might qualify as a hanging out movie. These people, there's a reunion going on. They went. I guess they were all busted for something in the late '60s. So it's 10 years in their past, but they were called the Secaucus 7. They all got busted for some political action, and then something brings them all back together. I kind of forget what, and you get to kind of catch up with all of them. So there's a theatrical production going on. Someone's still involved in theater. They're all just looking at life, But I don't know. I found it very inspiring, and it was a indie success at that time. And Sayles goes on to be really a very important filmmaker of the American indie scene, getting very consistent, and carries that flag all the way, that torch. He never deviates. I really admire him for that. So okay, so see you in a couple nights at that, I hope. Oh, any giveaways we could do? Let's see.
I want to thank Lars and Holly for letting me fill their shoes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Anyway, thanks, guys. See you soon. Thanks, John. It really meant a lot having you here.